Welcome, everybody, to the October meeting of the Philadelphia Association for Critical Thinking. I am Becky Strickland, the secretary. We have now been meeting via Zoom for well over a year, more like 18 months. We very much miss the face-to-face meetings we used to have, but Zoom has brought us attendees and speakers literally from around the world. PhACT supports science, reason, critical thinking, and science education. We encourage a thorough investigation of claims using the scientific method. Please see our website, which is www.phact.org, to join for $25 a year, and consider donating to our general operations and science fair prize funds. Your membership and donations help PhACT sponsor quality speakers like John de Lancie and Rob Powell today. Helps cover our Zoom and meetup costs and activities such as our annual summer picnic, all of which are free and open to everybody. Now, some information about the Zoom meeting. There is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You may have to run your cursor down there, because that's what I'm doing right now, because mine isn't showing up yet. You may have to run your cursor down there to see that. We hope to have 10 or 15 minutes for questions after Rob interviews John. There is also, please make your questions concise. You can type them in at any time. You can start typing them in now. There is also a chat box at the bottom of the screen that allows you to communicate with each other or the meeting organizers. Today we have Rob Palmer, aerospace engineer, author, and activist, who will interview John de Lancie, actor, director, author, activist, and Philadelphia native. Welcome, Rob and John. We're thrilled to have you. The screen is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you, Becky.
Happy to be here. Well, virtually, that is. Right.
This is the way of things, post-pandemic or current pandemic. So thanks for joining us today, John. I want to begin by addressing one question for the attendees, which I've been repeatedly asked online. Why is PhACT hosting a conversation with someone from the entertainment industry? Well, John is here through a series of events that started with me interviewing him for Skeptical Inquirer, the magazine of science and reason, published by CSI. And I did that interview as a prelude to his speaking at CSICon 2019. And all that brought John to the attention of the PhACT team, and so this is why we're here. So why discuss skeptical issues with John? Well, it turns out he's become an activist in matters regarding the intrusion of religion into the educational sphere, especially regarding its effect on keeping its fundamentalist adherents scientifically illiterate by pushing intelligent design. And as we know, especially in the current pandemic situation, science illiteracy is outright dangerous. So before we get into all that, it turns out John is actually a Philadelphia native. So I wanted to ask him a little bit about that. You were born in the city, John?
I was born in Philadelphia proper. My father was with the Philadelphia Orchestra. So I lived on Sampson Street as a little boy. My oldest friend, that is to say that the first friend, I guess, that I met when I was a year and a half old, as I was learning to walk on Rittenhouse Square with our parents, our mothers. I'm still in touch with Louis Rossman, Dr. Louis Rossman. So my father then went on to be the head of the Curtis Institute, and I've done some work for the Curtis and think it's a fantastic organization.
So he is the other John de Lancie that has a Wikipedia article then. I did get asked about that, if that was your father, the oboist?
That's right.
Ah, okay. And where did you go to school?
I went to school, we moved out to Ardmore, and I went to school at the Episcopal Academy, and promptly had flunked out of Episcopal, and then went to a smaller school called the Booth School, which was a kind of a country day school in I guess it would be Bryn Mawr. Sort of on the, I was very dyslexic at a time when nobody knew what dyslexia was. So you were simply called slow, stupid, lazy, hush, hush, mildly retarded. And so I was fortunate to go to this small school called the Booth School, where the headmistress at the time, Mrs. Booth, said, gee, I don't think your son has any of those problems. I think what he is dyslexic. But nobody knew what that was, and nobody did anything about it afterwards. But at least it wasn't that I was lazy.
Oh, wow. So did your interest in acting start at that time?
It did. It did. I had a wonderful teacher. We all had a wonderful teacher, Mr. Biddle. He was the assistant principal of the school, and he was, because it was a small school, 19 kids in the senior graduating class. This was a school where the teachers did everything and the students did everything. So I'm still in touch with my history teacher from there, and a number of my classmates from there. So he would come in, and in the course of a year, we would do 3 projects. So let's say at the beginning of the year, he would come in and he'd say to the 19 of us, we're going to do Mozart's Marriage of Figaro. I mean, we're 13 years old. Okay. So we're like, okay. And then, at Christmas, we're going to do Handel's Messiah, all of it. And then this particular year, and I think I was 14, he said, we're going to do, we have 2 months before the end of school. It was springtime. We're going to do Henry V, and de Lancie, you're going to play How. I had great difficulty reading it and just as much difficulty learning it, and obviously was scared, and I performed it. And there was a man who had come to see the show, to see his granddaughter. And it turns out he was the editor of the Pelican Shakespeares, which was those little Pelican Shakespeare books that every school had. And he took my father aside afterwards and he said, if your son has an interest, you might encourage him because he seems to have a flair for this. And I grabbed onto that like it was a life preserver, because it was the first time in 14 years, or let's say 10 years of going to school. It was the first time that anyone had said anything positive. So that's how I started to become an actor.
And how did the dyslexia play into that? Because I have to imagine it has to be hard reading and memorizing.
Yeah, it was a big deal, and it remains a big deal. Once I decided that would be a good thing. Oh, I'll be an actor. I realized also, well, I don't know how to read. So I started reading out loud. I couldn't read the big print stuff. I mean, I couldn't read just, open a book and just go like that. But I found a book of poems, and they were the golden treasury of poetry. I think that was the name. And what was great about it is that some of the poems were only this big, they were small and in columns, so my eyes could follow it. And I would read those out loud, and I would read them over and over and over again. And as time went on, I began to actually memorize them. And that was kind of my introduction into reading. And then my girlfriend at the time, who I'm still in touch with, I would say, yeah, let's go out, what have you. I'd go to her house and so on. But I want to read to you. I need to read out loud. So I would read out loud for, 15, 20 minutes, and then we would go out.
Yeah, so, and I think you just said that it impacts you to the current day. So like, how is that?
Well, when I was at Juilliard, a director made a very cogent comment to me. He said, I think you have a strange relationship with words. And I do. I process words a little differently, I think. And I certainly process letters in the alphabet, H and N and G and J. And when I went to school, the school I flunked out of, at the time, they wanted to teach a new way of reading, which was not phonetics. And that was, they were essentially sight cards, which was even compounded the problem for me. But all of this stuff you have to understand is understanding all of this in retrospect. At the time, this was a time when, if the teachers or your doctor or anybody of authority said anything, that was it. So my parents were like, well, I don't know, I guess he is lazy, or I guess he is slow. And, you know, and there, so there wasn't really anything to be done. And I don't know if there was anything that people knew to do. So I still have that. For me, taking on a role, the biggest issue is memorizing. That's the biggest issue to it. And I don't have any fear about going out on stage, and I don't have any fear about being in front of the camera, blah, 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 blah. My fear is that those first couple of weeks where I just have to pound lines. And I've done big shows. I mean, you know, Man and Superman with the Don Juan section, that's about 3 hours and a half, 3 hours and 3/4 on stage. So I've gotten through it, but it's not fun. And my wife, bless her, she will help me with lines. And interestingly enough, I mean, she will know the lines both sides way before I do in the process of cueing me. So it's just, it takes a while. But once they're in, as she has often tried to say to me, to be positive, she says, you know, once they're in, you are ready to walk on stage. You are ready to perform. Whereas most people, they learn the lines as sort of the tip of the spear. But I seem to bring everything forward at the same time. So it feels like a lot of heavy lifting, but that's it. You just, as I keep on saying, when I used to teach, I used to say to kids who had problems and difficulties, I said, hey, listen, some of us, it takes longer, and some of us, and this has to do with life. For some of us, it takes a little longer to put our pants on in the morning, but that's not what the issue is. The issue is what you do with the rest of the day. So just do it.
That's very good words of encouragement for people with the problem, or with children with dyslexia, that, you know, you've made it so as an actor. So, you know, it's something that's definitely overcomable.
Right.
The word. Okay. So let's see. Let's talk about your activism a bit. So you said at CSICon that religion provides the absolutism that science can't address. And you also said that you want to live in a world where knowing is more valued than believing. I love that line. And also that you greatly embrace change, as, you know, a lot of people make fun of science because it's never right, it's always changing. Did this mindset begin in your younger years in Philly, or is it something that you came to later in life?
No, actually, and this is apropos of what we were just talking about. The first book that I read fully, the first book, was Jules Verne's Mysterious Island. I was maybe about 12 or 13. And it was, if you know the story, it is about a bunch of guys in the Civil War who escape in a observation balloon, and you know, one's an engineer and the others, I don't remember exactly what all the characters are, but in any case, they arrive on this mysterious island. And what was extraordinary for me was that, and I remember reading it and going, oh my God, and I put the book down because one of them said, that hill over there has iron in it. We'll be able to get that iron, smelt it, whatever that meant at the time, and we'll be able to make tools. And I went, I want to be like that. I wanted to have that type of knowledge and to know enough things to be able to observe the world and make differences and what have you. And I think that had an enormous impact on me. They dealt with the real world. They had problems. They were real problems, and they solved their problems in a real way. They didn't spend their time, saying, please help me, like that. They just went at it, and they did it. And that has informed my life. Very cool. So in Back to the Future 3, Doc Brown mentioned he got a love of science from a Jules Verne novel. I believe it was a different one, but that's an interesting connection there. So at CSICon, you revealed that you had a number of science education projects in the works regarding pushing back on intelligent design, and that promote an understanding of evolution, especially among young people.
So I looked this up yesterday. This is very sad. In a 2019 Gallup poll, shows that 40% of US adults ascribe to the strictly creationist view of human origins, believing God created us in present form less than 10,000 years ago. 40%. And roughly 33% more believe, well, evolution sort of happened, but God really made it happen. So only 22% believe evolution is real and natural. So my understanding is there was an incident at a university while you were on an acting tour with a play about the Scopes monkey trial that brought this huge problem to your attention and made you want to do something about it. And the date 4004 BC, October 23rd, comes to mind. Can you tell us about that?
Ed Asner and I and a group of other actors were doing the actual trial transcripts from the Scopes monkey trial. And we were touring the country, and we did it over a 3-year period, and we would go for a month each time. And there is essentially a college circuit made up of really fabulous colleges, many of them, and with tremendous facilities, theaters that they've built and what have you. And we performed in that venue, in those venues all around the country. I was in Nebraska at the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, and I was at a Q&A. And there, a Q&A where there were maybe about 100, 110 kids in the class. And I was answering questions about acting and what have you. And at the end of that conversation, at the end of that hour, I said, I hope that you come and see this show tonight. And the teacher got up and said, yes, I saw it last night and was really terrific. And I really recommend that you do. And I said, please do. And I said, thank you. And thank you for being here, what have you. And then he looked at me directly in the eye and he kind of gave me one of those winks, or kind of, watch this. Watch this. This is what I'm dealing with. And this is what you're dealing with, John. And he turned to the class and he said, with a show of hands, how many of you believe that the world was created October 23rd on a Sunday at 10 o'clock in the morning, 4004 BC? Now, I had never heard this before, okay? And I would say about 80 kids raised their hands. And it was like a gut punch for me, because what happened at that moment for me was that my head dropped down, I'm looking at my feet, and I am feeling this suction in the room of 500 years of so many things that we as human beings had discovered and that are miraculous and that are so interesting and that are so important. I felt them just simply leave the room. And I was just like, oh. I didn't stand up and go, what are you talking about? It's ridiculous. I was just like, oh my God. So I looked back at him and he looked at me and I said, yes, well, thank you. I walked that night in the green room, I said to my fellow actors as we're getting ready to go on stage, I told them this story. And there was a gopher there. There were, always 3 or 4 college kids who were kind of the ones that would help us just at every college behind the scenes. And there was a young girl there who had been very sweet and whatever her name was, Mary. And I turned to her after telling the story. I turned to her and I said, gee, Mary, would you have raised your hand? And she said, oh, yes, absolutely. Why? She said, because God is my bus driver. I said, I don't know what that means, Mary. She says, it means that I can go to the back of my bus and party hardy because God is driving my bus. And I heard that as one of the biggest abdication of one's own personal responsibility to just be engaged in the real world. And it was at that point I went, you know what, I have to say something about this. I have to do something about this. It's just not right. this is not right. This is going to get us in trouble. This is, as a nation, this is going to get us in trouble. I often think over these days, and this was maybe about 15 years ago, where is Mary now at the age of 40? Or 35, 40 years old, where is she now? Who has been driving her bus?
Unfortunately, unlikely to be vaccinated.
Well, yes. And, certainly during the Trump period, I was thinking, well, where is Mary today? So in any case, and which comes back to the primary issue, which is critical thinking. And that is that the ability to discern. Faith is good, but there's a fine line between faith and delusion. And it's the ability to work your way through all of that. I have some dear friends, and one in particular who is very religious, but he is also a critical thinker and can make good decisions, has good judgment, because along with it, not necessarily in spite of it, but along with it. So now we're at that point where it is, and isn't it amazing? We have gotten to the point now. When I was a kid, that polio vaccine was, I remember it. I was like 6 years old, and it was like a miracle. A miracle had taken place. The world sighed. And I remember as a kid walking around, don't swim over there and don't touch that. And, you have to be careful. Who knew what the story was? But our parents were frightened. It was frightening and what have you. Here it is in 2020, we have a pandemic, and we've come up within the shortest period of time ever with a vaccination, which is a miracle, and half the country won't take it. And you kind of go, well, I don't know.
So following that incident, you became an activist of sorts, right? And a speaker at several humanist, atheist, skeptical conferences. Right. How did that first start? How did you get invited to your first one to start talking about this kind of stuff?
You know what? I can't remember exactly, but I'm sure Margaret Downey had something to do with it. Yeah.
I know you spoke at the Reason Rally in 2016 and CSICon, and just Googling you and activism on the web, there's quite a few appearances, sometimes in person, sometimes interviews that you've done. So right. One of the most moving speeches that I've seen from you was the one at the 2016 Reason Rally. It was about, the harm of uncritical belief. And let me just read a little piece of this ending for people who haven't seen it. So John gave a speech partly in Q character, and he said at the end, "But if you insist on believing in me," meaning a God, "you do so at your own risk. I will lead you down the path of ignorance, intolerance, and bigotry, all because you believe." And the whole speech is on John's wiki page, by the way, with a link to the video. So let's talk about the ignorance aspect of that. So it being a result of fundamentalism and what you're trying to do to help with the situation. So at CSICon, you mentioned two projects that you had in the works. One was a new play that you had co-written, dramatizing the recent important trial, Kitzmiller versus the Dover School District. Can you give us a summary of the trial before we get into the play?
Can I give you, I missed that.
Yeah, a summary of what the trial was about.
Well, it's not so much what the trial, the event was this, and that is that the school board was taken over by fundamentalist Christians, and who essentially attacked the, I can't remember exactly if it's the 8th grade or 9th grade science book, where the biology book, which is introduces evolution. And they used it as an opportunity to bring in intelligent design. Intelligent design is essentially creationism, which a number of years before the Supreme Court had struck down as being religious. And so intelligent design was just another refabrication of the same thing. So there are a number of parents and some teachers and what have you who got very upset about it, as well they should, and a lawsuit ensued. And it was what made it so interesting for me is that it was the continuation of the Scopes trial, except whatever, I'm not good with math, but let's call it 75 years later. The Scopes trial was in 1925, and what the judge did not permit was the introduction of evidence, none. So here, the Judge Jones, said, hey, let's hear the arguments. Let's hear the scientific argument, or let's just call it, let's hear the argument about evolution, and let's hear the argument about intelligent design. Well, in the end, it was a non-starter. It was so utterly a non-starter. But of course, the problem is that doesn't change very much. You know, for people who are insistent on believing no matter what, and as far as I'm concerned, for cynical reasons, the best current example is that our last election was rigged. For cynical reasons, we'll just continue to say the same thing over and over and over and over again. So within a matter of a couple of months, the intelligent design people were saying the same thing all over again. So it's an ongoing issue, and it's too bad that it has to be that way, because it's sort of, as far as I'm concerned, it is defending the indefensible. It is defending a swampy area. If you want to be able to say that God created the universe, you can do that. There isn't anyone who can take that away from you. But if you want to say it was October 3rd, a Sunday at 10 o'clock in the morning, 4004 BC, then you end up sounding like a fool, at least to most people.
So how did you synthesize all of that into a play?
Well, what I did was, and that's with the ample help of Kristen Traeger, who is a PhD student down in San Diego, who I met actually on a Star Trek cruise, and who's very interested in all of this. We just went through the voluminous amount of material that there is. I mean, tens of thousands of pages of transcript. And some of it is just brilliant, and some of it is really boring. And some of it, frankly, on the side of the intelligent design people is incomprehensible, because it is incomprehensible. And the judge in his summary said, none of this makes any sense. We don't try to present the entire trial. What we try to do, and what we did, is that we presented all of the events that led up to the trial, the problems during the school board meetings and all of that, all the carryings on in the classroom, the books that were being swapped out for science books. We do all of that. And then we give highlights of the trial. And at the end, we give the judge's summary. When you do something like this, this is, if you really want to find out about it, then, go and read the transcripts like we did. But for the general public, it's enough to find out about the issue and to go, oh, wow, is that possible? We have 45,000 school boards in this country, and they could all be overtaken, and they could, and so understand, if it's one religion that can do it, it's another religion that could do it. So everybody should keep their hands off. So in any case, this is sort of to get people on the bus. So we did this, and we did it as a radio play. And I had a captured audience, and that is that every year, those of us on Star Trek are asked to do a cruise, and we're also asked to perform something. to present something. So I presented the years before, I had presented a 1-hour version of the Scopes monkey trial. And this last year, well, the COVID year, I presented a 1-hour version of the intelligent design trial. The intent was to come back, put it into a longer form, go from 60 minutes into 90 minutes, bring all the actors into a recording studio, and then simply give it to the world. Anybody who wants to listen to it, it's free, just go. But COVID made that impossible. It's there, we have it all written. And when we can get back into studios with easily, I will do that. The other project, we were never able to figure out a way to bring it to fruition.
So yeah, the other project. Well, first I want you to go back to the play. So you performed it once. Is that what I understood?
Correct. Well, we performed it either twice or 4 times on the cruise, and I can't
on the same cruise. And
yeah.
So what was the reception? Because I assume a lot of people really didn't pay any attention to this trial. So were they surprised that this?
The reception was fantastic. I couldn't have asked for a better reception. I mean, it was everything that I could hope for a play that was being done for the first time. Where usually when you do a play for the first time, you do it in your living room, with friends. So this was done. Yes, it was done twice. It was done with an audience of about 1,500 the first night and another 1,500 the second night. And again, most people didn't know about it. Most people were amazed that all of the politics that were involved. Also, they got to hear things that they, for many of us, we go, oh, well, yes, of course, evolution. I'm completely behind it. I know all about that. Well, in fact, we really don't. When you have brilliant scientists and brilliant explainers like Dr. Miller explaining this as he did in the courtroom, and we've used those sections, you go, wow, I've really understood this. I've really understood this in a way that I never understood it before. And the same thing with when the intelligent design people had their time on the stand. You got to hear them. So you yourself were able to kind of weigh the arguments and what have you. So I think it was very successful, and like everything, so many things with this pandemic, it's been shelved for a while.
Oh, that's unfortunate. So since you brought up Star Trek, I wanted to ask you a Star Trek question, John. Are you okay with that?
Now, we talked about not saying anything about Star Trek,
Oh.
There, that takes care of it.
Where am I? John, sorry. I know you said that. All right.
Is it you who want a Star Trek question, or is it the audience who wants to?
I was going to ask. We'll go back to skepticism. Please, this is spooky. Thank you. Okay, all right, back to your project. God's Goose. That was the second thing you talked about at CSICon. Yeah, so is that the one you were talking about that you couldn't get off the ground?
That became more difficult. We wanted to do it as animation. We wanted to do lots of things. I'm not going to get into why it isn't as if we didn't try. We really, really, really tried. And
so you want to explain what that was?
Well, it was based off intelligent design. If you take that God was the intelligent designer, and then you look into our biological bodies, you discover certain issues that are not very intelligent, some pretty simple ones. We eat and breathe using the same pipe, as it were. Well, that's why about 6,000 of us choke every year in America to death. They're just, so it was to touch all of those things. The issue was not to tell it, but to show it and to do it with animation. And it's a much more complicated process than I ever knew. And we just got to the point where I just went, oh, hey, I'm batting 500 with, and so maybe we should leave it at that, and someone else will pick this up.
Yeah, it sounded like a nice idea. I remember you were talking about the windpipe, and there were certain other obvious things that an intelligent design.
Well, just the whole construction of the eye,
Yes, the cells, the light the photons having to go through material before they get to the receptors, and
and it also, one of the things is that what people don't understand, and that is that everything about us is not about perfection; it's about good enough.
Yeah,
evolution is about good enough.
Right. If you just understand that, then you look at things through that point of view, it's clear why we have all the problems we have, bad backs, spine, because, hey, we were quadrupeds and we're doing something strange. We're standing upright.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So let's see. Let's talk about some other false beliefs that are there besides ID. And so what are your thoughts on the connection of the anti-science thinking fermented by religion, fundamentalism, with things like QAnon, flat Earth, and COVID denialism? Like, how much of this is politics? How much is religion? What's the mix?
I don't know. I was asked recently, you play the character of Q, and I will bring up Star Trek. And they said, what do you think about QAnon? And I said, look, I play a god, not an idiot. And I don't know, I just can't. I made, in one of my speeches, I touched on something that, while I was writing, I was like, yeah, like that. And it keeps on coming back. We went to the moon. I mean, come on.
Landed 6 times.
Extraordinary. How impressive is that? But we now have people who say, well, actually, that was just a hoax. And I get upset about it because, these were great men and women who put together a program that went as far as to go to the moon. These other little, I don't even know what to say. These other people go, no, it was just a hoax. I go, what is it? Is it they've just never done anything of any consequence? They're not important. They haven't provided anything important, and so all they can do is tear it down. For which I have so little respect for that. And so along with, and this is all by way of saying the QAnon, I have so little respect for it that I don't really spend any time thinking about it, other than I hear about it every once in a while. And I go, God, how stupid that is.
So I was asked to ask you.
What's that?
I was asked to ask you if you wish your character in Star Trek was named with a different letter.
Well, yeah. No, remember, I was first. So
true.
So no, it's too stupid for words, quite frankly. It's just too stupid for words.
Yeah, and yet, right, since we last talked, which was fall of 2019, right, QAnon was in existence, but it became such a huge thing that it was at least partly responsible for the assault on the Capitol. It's quite amazing. And as far as I understand, it is not gone.
Yeah. Well, I can't tell you that I saw anybody who was assaulting the Capitol that I had too much respect for. So,
And all wrapped up in this, of utmost importance now is the denialism of medical science. As you mentioned, we have a miracle vaccine, many of them, in fact, and people are refusing to take it. When you were on a talk show, Truth Wanted, just a year ago, almost exactly to the week, you mentioned the number of deaths was 165,000, which at the time seemed like horrendous. And now we're over 700,000. And a large part of that is since we've had the vaccine. It's just amazing.
Hey, you know what? Listen, If it only affected them, I'd go,
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
What can I say? Keep drinking your, you won't take something for which hundreds of millions, if not up to 1 billion people have taken now. I don't know. I don't know. I had mentioned polio back. I looked up the stats on polio back. I think it was 1954 was the Salk vaccine. In 1953, there was 60,000 people who were affected by polio in the United States. 60,000, of which about 3,700, let's call it 4,000 had died. Now, you want to compare that to 700,000? And when that vaccine came out, as I said before, we thought it was the greatest thing that happened. So I don't know. I don't know. Critical thinking, or the lack of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I won't take the vaccine, but I'll take something else that whatever, some horse.
Yeah. They have, people who have that attitude and get sick, and they have no problem going to a hospital and taking the, helpful medicine, the other stuff that they don't know what's in, to try to get them over the sickness. Many of them, of course, die.
Right.
Yeah. So I actually looked up this number too. It's very distressing. As of last month, there's a map that breaks up the counties in the US that voted for Biden versus the ones that voted for Trump, and how much are fully vaccinated. And there's a over 13% difference, and the gap is widening. So it's clearly at least partly political, partly because the bubble of that. But there's also a huge overlap, unfortunately, between the Christian right and the GOP, which definitely has an influence. In my personal life, a lot of my family are fundamentalist Christians, and they didn't get vaccinated. And I still don't see a reason. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Is everybody in your life?
God's going to protect me, and then
he
ends up saying, in the joke, he said, I did protect you. I sent you a vaccine.
Is everybody in your life vaccinated?
Everybody in our life is vaccinated. I do have one or two members of my extended family who are not. I dare say that they fall into they're just not. So, but
unfortunate.
Yeah.
So all right. So last question I'm going to ask you, then I'll turn it over to Becky to take questions from people online. So I know you have a great interest in sailing. I read about your trip all the way to Tahiti from Los Angeles. So where does this fit in with your love of science and exploration and knowing the world? And by the way, do you do this alone? I wasn't clear when I read.
No, I didn't do it alone. Actually, I did it with a friend of mine who I went to school with, at drama school with, and then two of my son's friends. That was the trip there. And then on the way back, I did it with a young man who was a friend of my other son's, and he had never gone sailing, and he was great because we had some issues out there, and his mindset was, he was very calm and what have you, and so it was a very, very good experience. I think it comes from that book. I think it comes from that book of wanting to be involved in adventurous stuff, where you have to think positively. You have to also think rationally. One of the things in which I like so much about sailing is that it gets me out of my head. I am spending time creating, literally all the time. Any of us who sail, we always talk about this. I'm going through this inlet now. What if my engine went out? Make sure that I have one of my sails up. What if I did this? A series of what ifs for which you are finding solutions, so that all of these things depending on where you are in RAM, are up in RAM, and they're sort of ready to go. So you're not one of these people who goes, oh my God, what's happening? Where am I? Where's the wind coming from? So that's something which I enjoy very much in sailing.
Cool. And if people want to read more about that, by the way, John's website, which is johndelancey.com, if I'm not mistaken, right, has actually a newsletter which includes your whole description of that trip. Fascinating. All right, I am going to ask you one Trek question.
Of course.
So, no, don't please. That was scary enough. When the Picard series was announced, you were asked numerous times in interviews I saw online, including by me, if Q would be invited back. And you always said, no way, who wants a geriatric Q? So I'm so glad that didn't happen. How did that change?
Well, it changed because they asked me.
So did they not discuss it with you? Like, we said, okay, Q will just make himself look older so that Patrick Stewart, Picard, who is also aged as a human, doesn't feel so bad.
Yes. Oh, I mean, that's the detailing part. The first thing was a call to my agents. My agent said, they're interested in you playing Q again. I was like, really? Do you mind meeting with having a meeting? And I went in to meet with Terry. We had a very nice conversation. I do remember saying to them, you're not going to put me in tights like back in 35 years ago, are you? And they said, no. I said, okay, I'm halfway there. And they said, actually, you're going to be more like you are now. And I said, even to the extent of a beard and stuff like that. They said, we'll think about all of that. So it's a different take, not totally different by any stretch of the imagination. There's still the relationship with me and Picard. There's all of that type of stuff. But, I dare say it's a little bit more of a mature Q, but certainly the mad, bad, and dangerous to know part is still there. So
I love that. Thank you. Okay, Becky, if you're still there, I haven't seen your video in a while. There you go. Take it away. Thank you, John. I'll let Becky, you're on mute, Becky.
Yes, okay.
I will let Becky take it away with audience questions.
Okay.
Thanks so much, John.
Okay, and we have
nice chatting.
Guys, this was just excellent. And I want you to know we have maintained our audience. I get the statistics down here at the bottom of the screen, and we've maintained our audience the entire time, and that doesn't always happen. I also want to let everybody know that John is under a time schedule here, so the lengthy Q&A that we normally do is not going to happen, but I have a couple comments. One is, I'm so glad to hear about your play concerning the Dover Board of Ed versus Kitzmiller. I don't know if you know, John, but our organization is 26 years old. We go back a bit, and most of our founding members are still very active. We had Judge John Jones come and speak around 2005. Yes.
Wow.
I had to miss that meeting, but I heard it was amazing. And I think he also made the comment that he, for many years, thought his first name was Bush appointee, Judge John Jones. And we also had Lori Lebo, and I'm not sure how to spell her name, but she wrote an excellent book. Excellent book.
Yes, absolutely.
Have you read it?
Yes. Oh, yes. Very much.
Yeah, so we had her speak also. So
right.
Really glad to hear about the play. I'm trying to think of a way we could get all of you out to a PhACT meeting and do it now. No pressure. No pressure. But as you and Rob were talking, I'm thinking of all the different backgrounds that we have and different ways that we come to skepticism and different ways that we can communicate with people and maybe get through with them. And I did read, thank you to all the people who wrote in the Q&A. I did read a number of questions along the lines of how can we get people to think more critically? And I would say, bring them to a meeting, bring them to a skeptical meeting. That's probably the way. So we all have these different styles that we use, and that's really what it takes. So thank you to both of you for sharing your experiences. Rob, your questions showcased John beautifully, really amazing. Looking forward to the Skeptical Inquirer article. And John, thank you so much. We had a number of comments in the chat about you sharing your experiences with dyslexia. I think you probably do realize how important that is for the people that are struggling with it, for their parents. As an educator, I worked with people with all kinds of learning disabilities, and it is absolutely possible to have a very successful life along with it, not even in spite of it, along with it, to turn it into a strength in some way. Thank you so much, because we're starting to, Tom Cruise share, there are a number of people who are in the public eye who have said, I'm dyslexic. We need to hear that. So we have a couple more minutes. I'm going to look at the question, and a lot of the questions, what have you found to be the most effective strategy to get people to think more critically? It's a wonderful question, and it's a really, really broad one. So let me scroll up here. Okay. Mr. de Lancie, how do you remain optimistic when it seems like the world is full of morons and fools? You are one of the most considerate and thoughtful people I've ever seen. Let me see if there's more to this. Yeah, I wanted to read that because that's really a wonderful compliment to the way you're coming across. How do you remain optimistic?
With difficulty, more and more with difficulty. When I consider the fact that, as I'm going to go back and say, we have a miracle vaccine that would have simply made this pandemic far less deadly, and we have created such obstacles about it on something, as far as I'm concerned, which is really simple. It's really simple. I mean, come on, this is not a big, how are we going to take care of climate change? How are we going to do that? And when I think about it, I think, wow, we haven't been around for very long as a species. There's nothing that guarantees we're going to be around for a long time. Nothing, absolutely nothing. And when I start thinking about that, I start getting a little depressed about it. So it's difficult. I have grandchildren. I would like them to grow up in a nice environment, somewhat like I've grown up, and my parents before me, and what have you. But when I start thinking about the huge migrations that are going to start taking place all around the world, that the stresses that we're going to be dealing with, it's difficult. It's difficult. Bill Shatner just went off into space. You ask, I mean, listen, they asked Bill, I'm sure, Blue Origin, asked Bill because, having Shatner on a rocket ship is great publicity for them. But it's also, he was really touched by the fact that he's flying up there, and then all of a sudden, it's black. It's black. There is no more atmosphere. And it happened really fast. And all of a sudden, as he said, we are in the dead zone, the death zone. And that really affected him. And so he's going to end up saying that over and over and over again, because I know Bill, and there people are going to say, well, how were you affected? He's going to, and so that's something, that is a tiny little sliver that saves us from oblivion. We perhaps need to start taking care of that, along with so many other things. But, so much of this has to do with honesty, and I don't mean just honesty in terms of giving somebody back their correct change. I'm just talking about being honest. Just being honest. Just saying what is true, and just not all of these games that are carrying on. So that it's all in there that I lose some of my optimism.
I understand. And one of the questions we had on the Q&A was, are you interested in going up like Shatner did? That's quicker. That's either yes or no.
I'm willing to risk my life at sea. where it isn't like instantaneously, you kind of go, oh, that didn't work out.
Yeah.
Boom, like that. At sea, it's a little, I'm willing to risk my life in there where it's a little, so I guess the answer is no.
I understand completely. Well, John and Rob, both of you, this has been amazing. Thank you so, so much, both of you. Thank you, everybody. And watch for the meetup invitation for our November meeting, which has not been nailed down yet. So,
Thank you. It's been wonderful. It's been wonderful. And this is what I ask of the audience who are in Philadelphia. I come to Philadelphia every once in a while, always in search of the same thing. The best hoagie. I'm a huge hoagie fan. So I want to hear where the next hoagie place I should go to.
You want people to write you about that?
Absolutely.
We can make that happen.
Okay.
We can make that happen.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, John. Thank you, Eric, for setting this up. Goodbye, everybody.